Calm rarely disappears in the middle of a crisis. More often, it slips away in moments so ordinary they hardly seem worth noticing. A passing comment stays with you for hours. A brief expression on someone's face begins to feel like silent judgment. An unexpected inconvenience quietly reshapes the rest of your day. None of these moments seem powerful on their own, yet together they reveal something unsettling. The greatest threats to your peace are often not the events themselves, but the meaning your mind gives them long after they've passed. A quiet paradox lives inside nearly every emotional struggle. The more desperately you try to avoid discomfort, the more influence discomfort seems to gain over you. The search for constant respect makes criticism feel unbearable. The need for certainty turns ordinary surprises into sources of anxiety. Depending on kindness from everyone around you gives complete strangers the ability to shape your emotional world without ever realizing it. Slowly, almost unnoticed, your peace becomes tied to people, circumstances, and outcomes that have never truly belonged to your control. Freedom begins the moment you recognize that the battle was never taking place entirely outside you. The Stoics returned to this truth again and again because they understood that a steady mind is never built by waiting for life to become easier, more predictable, or more fair. It is built by learning to meet uncertainty without surrendering yourself to it. Once that shift begins, criticism loses much of its power. Setbacks stop becoming personal identities, and silence becomes wiser than impulse. The world will continue testing your patience in countless ways, but whether it succeeds is no longer determined by the world. It is determined by the place from which you choose to respond. Most emotional suffering begins long before anything visible takes place. Long before an argument unfolds, before disappointing news arrives, or before someone's behavior catches you off guard, the mind has already started writing a quiet script for how the day is supposed to unfold. It assumes people will notice your effort without needing to be reminded. It assumes kindness will naturally be returned, promises will be kept, and fairness will eventually balance every situation. These assumptions rarely announce themselves. They settle quietly beneath your awareness until reality chooses a different direction. Then frustration appears so quickly that it feels as though the outside world created it. In truth, much of that frustration was already waiting beneath the surface, simply looking for something to attach itself to. The event only revealed what had already been prepared within your own expectations. This is why two people can experience the exact same situation and walk away carrying completely different emotional burdens. One person sees a delay as a minor inconvenience and continues with their day. Another interprets the same delay as disrespect, incompetence, or proof that nothing ever works in their favor. The circumstances may be identical, but the inner conversation is entirely different. That silent conversation determines far more about your emotional life than the event itself ever could. Without realizing it, your mind compares reality against an invisible standard that nobody else can see. Every interaction is measured against it. Every conversation is judged by it. Whenever reality falls short of that internal picture, disappointment quietly fills the gap. It feels natural because it happens so quickly, but speed should never be confused with truth. Many people spend years trying to eliminate frustration by changing the people around them. They hope better friends will finally understand them. They hope more respectful co-workers will remove unnecessary stress. They hope a kinder partner, a more reasonable stranger, or a more predictable world will eventually provide the peace they have been searching for. For a brief moment, those changes often seem to work. New environments feel refreshing. Different relationships feel easier. Better circumstances create temporary relief. Then something unexpected happens again. Another misunderstanding appears. Another promise is broken. Another plan changes without warning. Before long, the same emotional patterns return, wearing different faces. The common thread was never the specific people involved. It was the expectation that life would eventually stop behaving like life. This realization can feel uncomfortable because it shifts attention away from what others are doing and brings it back toward the habits of your own mind. That is not an invitation to excuse harmful behavior or pretend difficult situations do not exist. People can certainly act unfairly. Circumstances can genuinely become painful. Loss, betrayal, and disappointment are real experiences that deserve honest recognition. The deeper question is whether those experiences should continue controlling your emotional state long after they have occurred. There is an important difference between feeling pain and becoming attached to it. One is unavoidable. The other quietly grows each time you insist reality should have unfolded differently than it did. The longer that resistance remains, the heavier the emotional burden becomes. Think about how often the mind argues with events that cannot be reversed. A conversation has already ended, yet it continues for hours inside your head. Someone has already made their decision, yet your thoughts keep searching for different outcomes that no longer exist. Plans changed yesterday, but your emotions remain trapped in the version of events that never happened. While your body continues moving through the present, part of your attention remains committed to correcting a reality that has already passed. As Seneca observed, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. This habit drains enormous amounts of mental energy without producing a single meaningful result. The mind believes it is solving a problem when it is actually feeding it. Every replay strengthens the emotional connection to the disappointment instead of weakening it. Something begins to change when you stop asking why reality refuses to match your expectations and start asking where those expectations came from in the first place. Many of them were never consciously chosen. They developed gradually through childhood experiences, social conditioning, personal successes, painful failures, and countless observations collected over many years. Somewhere along the way, your mind quietly decided what respectful people should sound like, how loyal friends should behave, how recognition should arrive, and what fairness should look like. Those conclusions became so familiar that they started feeling like universal truths rather than personal interpretations. The problem is that the world never agreed to follow those private rules. People continue acting according to their own understanding, carrying their own fears, insecurities, distractions, and priorities. Reality keeps unfolding independently of the standards your mind has created. This is where genuine inner stability begins to emerge. Instead of demanding certainty from an uncertain world, you gradually learn to loosen your grip on the expectations, creating unnecessary tension. You still value honesty, kindness, responsibility, and fairness, but your emotional balance no longer depends on everyone else consistently living according to those values. That shift creates an entirely different relationship with everyday life. Unexpected delays become easier to accept because they are no longer interpreted as personal attacks. Disagreements become opportunities to understand rather than battles that must always be won. Even disappointment loses much of its intensity because it no longer collides with rigid assumptions about how reality was supposed to behave. The calmer your expectations become, the less control circumstances have over your inner world, and that quiet freedom is something no outside event can easily take away. That realization naturally leads to a deeper question. If your peace does not truly belong to other people, why can a single sentence from them seem powerful enough to shape the rest of your day? A brief comment can follow you for hours. A look across the room can leave you questioning yourself long after everyone else has forgotten it happened. An unexpected criticism can echo in your thoughts while everything else around you continues as normal. It feels as though another person reached inside your mind and rearranged your emotions, but that is rarely what actually happened. Their words simply arrived at a place where something was already waiting. They touched an old belief, an old fear, or an old expectation that had been quietly living beneath the surface for much longer than the conversation itself. This is one of the easiest truths to overlook because the mind naturally focuses on what happened most recently. When someone disappoints you, attention immediately moves toward their behavior. When someone rejects your effort, your thoughts stay fixed on the rejection. The present moment feels so vivid that it seems completely responsible for your emotional reaction. Yet emotions almost never develop in isolation. They carry history with them. One careless remark often awakens memories that have nothing to do with the person who spoke it. A moment of disrespect may remind you of countless other moments when you felt overlooked. The present becomes connected to the past so quickly that the two experiences become almost impossible to separate. What feels like one painful encounter is often many different experiences speaking with the same voice. That is why certain situations affect you far more deeply than they affect someone else standing beside you. Two people can receive the same criticism, and one shrugs it off while the other spends days thinking about it. The difference is rarely found in the words themselves. It is found in the meaning those words awaken. One mind hears feedback, another hears failure. One sees disagreement, another sees rejection. Neither reaction is created entirely by the present event. Each response is filtered through years of accumulated experiences, beliefs, disappointments, and private conclusions about what those moments are supposed to mean. The mind does not simply hear what is being said. It immediately compares it with everything it has already learned to expect. Many of those lessons were never consciously chosen. They formed quietly over time. Perhaps praise became connected to feeling worthy. Perhaps mistakes became connected to feeling inadequate. Maybe being ignored once carried so much emotional weight that the mind decided it must never happen again. These invisible conclusions remain hidden until life accidentally touches them. Then the emotional reaction feels immediate and overwhelming because it appears to come from nowhere. In reality, it comes from somewhere very familiar. The situation only uncovered what had been waiting beneath the surface all along. Instead of creating the wound, it simply revealed that it had never fully disappeared. This understanding changes the direction of your attention. Instead of asking why someone else behaved the way they did, you become curious about why their behavior affected you so deeply. That shift is quiet, but it is incredibly important. Blaming another person keeps your focus on something you cannot control. Looking inward does not mean blaming yourself instead. It means recognizing that your emotional life contains information worth understanding rather than simply reacting to. The goal is not to judge your feelings or pretend they should disappear. The goal is to become familiar with the patterns that repeatedly shape your experience. Once those patterns become visible, they lose much of the power they once held over you. This process requires patience because the mind prefers simple explanations. It is easier to say, "They ruined my day," than to admit the day was influenced by beliefs carried for years. Looking beneath the surface asks more of you. It asks you to notice recurring themes instead of isolated moments. Perhaps criticism consistently feels unbearable. Perhaps being misunderstood creates unusually strong frustration. Perhaps uncertainty always brings anxiety before anything has even gone wrong. These patterns are rarely random. They point toward parts of yourself that are still seeking reassurance, certainty, or approval. As Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Seeing these patterns clearly is not a sign of weakness. It is the beginning of genuine self-knowledge. Once you begin observing these reactions without immediately acting on them, something remarkable happens. Space begins to appear between the event and your response. That space may only last a few seconds at first, but within those few seconds, the emotional experience changes completely. Instead of being carried away by the first impulse, you have an opportunity to examine it. You notice your thoughts rushing toward familiar conclusions. You recognize the old story beginning to replay. Rather than accepting it as absolute truth, you quietly ask whether the present moment truly deserves the same interpretation as the past. Often, the answer is no. The current situation may still be unpleasant, but it no longer needs to inherit the emotional weight of everything that came before it. Gradually, this becomes less of a technique and more of a different way of moving through life. Criticism still arrives, rejection still happens, disappointment remains part of being human. None of those experiences disappear simply because you understand them better. What changes is the role they play inside your mind. They stop becoming proof that something is wrong with you and start becoming opportunities to understand yourself more honestly. Instead of spending all your energy fighting the people around you, you begin recognizing the habits of thought that have quietly influenced your emotional life for years. That awareness does not make life perfect, but it makes your inner world far more stable. The battle shifts from trying to control everyone else's behavior to learning how your own mind creates meaning. And that shift is where lasting peace quietly begins to take root. Once you begin paying closer attention to your own reactions, a pattern quietly reveals itself. The emotion always seems to arrive first. It appears before careful thinking, before balanced judgment, before you have fully understood what actually happened. A message takes longer than expected to receive, and disappointment appears almost instantly. Someone speaks with less warmth than usual, and your mood begins shifting before you've considered any other explanation. The mind moves with incredible speed, filling silence with conclusions and uncertainty with stories that feel complete the moment they appear. It does this so naturally that you rarely notice the process taking place. You only notice the emotion that follows. It feels immediate, convincing, and impossible to question because it arrives wearing the disguise of certainty rather than possibility. This habit has protected human beings in many ways throughout history. The brain evolved to make quick judgments because hesitation once carried real danger. It learned to recognize patterns rapidly, predict outcomes, and prepare for threats before they fully appeared. That ability helped people survive uncertain environments, but it also created a tendency that becomes less helpful in everyday life. Modern challenges are rarely solved by instant emotional conclusions, yet the mind still behaves as though every uncertain moment requires an immediate answer. Instead of waiting for more information, it creates its own. Instead of admitting that something is unclear, it quietly replaces uncertainty with interpretation. The story feels so believable that you begin responding to the interpretation rather than to reality itself. A delayed reply becomes evidence that someone is losing interest. A brief silence during a conversation suddenly feels uncomfortable because your thoughts decide it must mean disapproval. A friend who seems distracted is assumed to be upset with you. A coworker walking past without saying hello somehow becomes proof that something has changed between you. None of these conclusions arrive because you deliberately chose them. They appear automatically, almost as if your mind is trying to protect you by preparing for disappointment before it has the chance to surprise you. Ironically, that attempt at protection often creates the very suffering it hopes to prevent. You begin experiencing emotional pain produced not by facts, but by assumptions that have never been tested. If these reflections help you see yourself and the world with a little more clarity, consider subscribing. This is a place people who want to practice these ideas, not just understand them. You're choosing to return to conversations that strengthen your mind, deepen your perspective, and remind you that lasting peace is something you build, one thoughtful decision at a time. The difficulty is not that the mind creates stories. It always will. Human beings naturally seek meaning, and meaning requires interpretation. The real challenge begins when those interpretations are accepted without examination. The first explanation becomes the only explanation. Alternative possibilities disappear before they are even considered. A simple misunderstanding turns into evidence that someone no longer respects you. An unanswered question becomes a personal insult. A mistake becomes proof that you are failing. Once those conclusions settle into place, your emotions respond as though they are reacting to objective reality. The body becomes tense, thoughts become heavier, decisions become more reactive. All of this happens because an interpretation quietly stepped into the place where certainty should have remained absent. One of the most valuable skills you can develop is learning to recognize the difference between what actually happened and the meaning your mind immediately attached to it. Those two things often feel identical, but they are not. Someone may have cancelled plans. That is a fact. The belief that they no longer value your friendship is an interpretation. A conversation may have ended awkwardly. That happened. Deciding that you embarrassed yourself beyond repair is a story. Separating events from interpretations does not remove emotion altogether, nor should it. Emotions provide valuable information. They point toward what matters to you. They reveal fears, hopes, values, and unresolved experiences. The mistake is assuming they always reveal objective truth. This quiet separation creates something many people rarely experience in moments of emotional intensity: space. It is only a brief pause, but within that pause, your relationship with the situation begins to change. Instead of being carried away by the first explanation that appears, you become capable of watching it unfold. You notice the familiar patterns. You recognize how quickly your thoughts begin predicting outcomes. Rather than following those predictions automatically, you allow yourself to remain uncertain for a little longer. That uncertainty may feel uncomfortable at first because the mind prefers immediate answers. Still, patience often reveals possibilities that emotional urgency completely overlooks. Remaining with uncertainty is surprisingly difficult. The mind wants closure. It wants a reason, a conclusion, and a clear explanation it can hold on to. Yet, many situations simply do not provide immediate clarity. Other people carry thoughts you cannot read. Circumstances unfold according to factors you cannot fully see. Waiting before assigning meaning is not weakness or indecision. It is discipline. It is the willingness to admit that reality is often more complex than your first emotional reaction suggests. That willingness protects you from becoming trapped inside stories that feel convincing but lack real evidence. As this habit becomes stronger, you begin noticing subtle changes throughout your daily life. Small misunderstandings lose much of their emotional intensity because you stop treating your first interpretation as the final answer. Conversations become lighter because you are no longer responding to imagined motives before they have been confirmed. Relationships improve because assumptions are replaced with curiosity. Instead of reacting to what you think someone meant, you become more interested in what they actually intended. This simple shift reduces countless unnecessary conflicts that once seemed unavoidable. Many arguments begin not with facts, but with assumptions that were never questioned. Over time, the pause between an event and your interpretation becomes one of the most valuable forms of inner freedom you can develop. Life continues presenting uncertainty, disappointment, and unexpected situations. People remain imperfect. Circumstances still refuse to follow carefully designed plans. None of that changes. What changes is your ability to meet those moments without immediately surrendering your peace to the first story your mind invents. You become less interested in reacting quickly and more interested in seeing clearly. That clarity rarely arrives through urgency. It grows through observation, patience, and the quiet discipline of allowing reality to reveal itself before deciding what it means. Once that becomes your natural way of moving through life, your emotional world becomes steadier, your judgments become wiser, and your responses begin reflecting intention instead of impulse. If your interpretations shape your emotions, then your attention quietly becomes one of the most valuable things you possess. It may not feel important because attention is invisible. You cannot hold it in your hands or measure it the way you measure time or money. Yet it influences almost every experience you have. Whatever receives your attention begins shaping your emotional world. Whatever repeatedly occupies your thoughts gradually becomes part of your perspective. This happens so subtly that it often escapes notice. A single unpleasant conversation can remain alive for hours simply because your attention keeps returning to it. A careless comment can continue affecting your mood long after it has been forgotten by the person who spoke it. The event itself ends quickly, but your attention keeps giving it new life. In many ways, your inner world is built less by what happens to you and more by what you repeatedly choose or unconsciously allow yourself to focus on. This becomes easier to understand when you notice how different experiences compete for your awareness throughout an ordinary day. News headlines demand your concern before breakfast. Notifications interrupt your thoughts while you are trying to concentrate. Opinions appear everywhere, each one asking for agreement, disagreement, or emotional investment. Conversations drift toward conflict because conflict naturally attracts attention. Social media rewards outrage with visibility, making the loudest voices seem like the most important ones. Without realizing it, you can spend an entire day reacting to events that never truly belong to your own life. Your mind becomes crowded with problems you cannot solve, arguments you never intended to join, and frustrations that quietly drain your energy while offering nothing valuable in return. Many people mistake constant engagement for awareness. They believe staying informed means responding to everything. They convince themselves that correcting every misunderstanding, answering every criticism, or defending every opinion demonstrates strength. Yet constant reaction often reveals the opposite. It shows that your attention is being directed by whatever happens to appear in front of you instead of being guided by deliberate choice. There is an important difference between paying attention and being captured by attention. One reflects intention, the other reflects habit. When every disagreement demands your response, every insult demands your defense, and every distraction demands your focus, your inner stability slowly becomes dependent on forces you never intended to serve. This is why a calm mind is built just as much by what it refuses to entertain as by what it welcomes. Refusing does not mean denying reality or pretending problems do not exist. It means recognizing that not everything deserves equal space within your mind. Some situations require thoughtful action. Others simply invite endless emotional involvement without producing anything meaningful. Learning to recognize that difference changes everything. You begin asking whether a particular thought deserves another hour of your attention, whether an online argument will improve your character or simply consume your patience, whether replaying someone's criticism for the 20th time offers fresh understanding or merely strengthens an unnecessary emotional habit. Those questions quietly return authority to you instead of leaving it in the hands of every passing distraction. One reason this discipline feels difficult is because the mind naturally mistakes urgency for importance. Anything emotionally charged immediately appears worthy of attention. A harsh comment feels more significant than genuine encouragement. One moment of embarrassment outweighs dozens of ordinary successes. The brain keeps returning to whatever seems threatening because it believes doing so increases safety. Unfortunately, that instinct often keeps emotional discomfort alive far longer than necessary. Instead of allowing difficult moments to pass, attention repeatedly revisits them until they begin shaping your identity. A single mistake becomes evidence that you always fail. One awkward interaction becomes proof that people secretly judge you. The more attention those thoughts receive, the stronger they appear, even when reality provides very little support for them. Learning to guide your attention requires quiet discipline rather than dramatic effort. It begins with noticing where your thoughts naturally travel whenever your mind becomes still. Some people immediately return to old resentments. Others revisit future worries that have not happened yet. Some replay conversations they wish had gone differently. None of these habits develop overnight, And they rarely disappear overnight either. They soften through repeated awareness. Each time you notice your attention wandering towards something that cannot improve your present life, you gently bring it back. Not through force, not through frustration, but through steady intention. That simple act may seem insignificant, yet repeated often enough, it gradually reshapes the way your mind responds to everyday experience. As this habit grows stronger, you discover that attention behaves much like a garden. Whatever receives regular care continues growing. Thoughts fed with constant attention become easier to access. Emotional patterns repeated every day begin feeling familiar, then natural, and eventually inevitable. The opposite is equally true. Thoughts that no longer receive your attention slowly lose their influence. Old resentments become quieter. Small irritations fade more quickly. Worries that once dominated your thinking gradually lose their emotional intensity because they are no longer receiving the steady nourishment of your focus. You are not forcing yourself to forget them. You are simply refusing to keep them alive through constant repetition. This change also transforms your relationships with other people. When your attention is no longer consumed by searching for hidden insults or imagined criticism, conversations become lighter. You begin listening more carefully instead of preparing defensive responses before someone has finished speaking. You notice kindness that previously went overlooked because your mind was busy searching for problems. Patience becomes easier because your attention is no longer trapped inside every minor inconvenience. Even difficult people lose much of their influence because you stop giving their behavior unlimited space inside your thoughts. They may still act the same way, but your inner world is no longer organized around their actions. Eventually, protecting your attention stops feeling like a strategy and becomes a way of living. You no longer measure every situation by how strongly it pulls at your emotions. Instead, you quietly decide whether it deserves a place within your mind at all. That decision becomes one of the greatest expressions of self-discipline because it recognizes a simple truth that many people overlook. Your attention shapes your experience of life more than almost anything else. Guarding it carefully does not make you distant or indifferent. It allows you to remain fully present for the people, responsibilities, and moments that truly matter while letting unnecessary noise pass without taking your peace along with it. Protecting your attention changes more than the thoughts that occupy your mind. It gradually changes the way you move through conflict itself. Disagreements begin to look different once you stop seeing them as battles that must always produce a winner and a loser. Many arguments never begin because of the actual issue being discussed. They begin because two people quietly feel that accepting another perspective somehow weakens their own. The conversation slowly shifts away from understanding and moves toward defending identities. Voices become sharper, patience disappears, and before long the original subject is barely remembered. What remains is the need to be right. That need feels powerful in the moment, yet it often leaves behind an emptiness that victory alone cannot satisfy. It is surprisingly easy to confuse being correct with being at peace. You can present better arguments, gather stronger evidence, and still walk away carrying frustration for the rest of the day. Winning a disagreement does not automatically quiet the mind. Sometimes it does the opposite. You continue replaying the conversation, thinking of what you should have added, wondering whether the other person truly understood your point. Even after receiving the final word, your thoughts remain trapped inside the exchange. The discussion may have ended, but your attention continues feeding it. That lingering attachment quietly reveals that the real struggle was never about convincing someone else. It was about the emotional investment you placed in the outcome. This realization invites a different way of approaching difficult conversations. Instead of entering every disagreement with the goal of changing another person's mind, you begin asking yourself what truly deserves your energy. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. Not every criticism deserves a response. Not every opinion needs your approval or your resistance. This does not mean becoming passive or avoiding necessary conversations. Some situations require honesty, clear boundaries, and direct communication. The difference lies in your motivation. Are you speaking because clarity is needed or because your pride feels threatened? Those two impulses may look similar from the outside, yet they lead to completely different outcomes within you. Pride has an unusual way of disguising itself as principle. It convinces you that every challenge to your perspective is a challenge to your worth. Once that happens, listening becomes difficult because your attention shifts toward defending yourself instead of understanding the other person. You begin preparing your next response before they have finished speaking. Small disagreements become personal contests. The conversation stops being about discovering truth and starts revolving around protecting identity. Ironically, the harder you fight to defend that identity, the more fragile it becomes. It depends entirely on how other people respond, agree, disagree, praise, or criticize. Your emotional balance quietly becomes tied to opinions that were never fully within your control. Choosing a different path often feels uncomfortable at first because it asks you to resist an immediate impulse. The impulse says, "Answer now. Explain yourself. Make sure they understand." Waiting even a few moments can feel almost unnatural. During that pause, however, something important becomes possible. The emotional intensity begins to settle just enough for clearer thinking to return. You notice that your first reaction was driven more by emotion than by wisdom. You recognize that not every accusation deserves your defense. You see that silence is not always surrender. Sometimes it is evidence that your inner stability no longer depends upon immediate validation. Silence is frequently misunderstood because it is associated with weakness or avoidance. In reality, silence can express remarkable confidence when it is chosen deliberately. It communicates that you are no longer compelled to answer every provocation placed in front of you. It allows unnecessary conflict to lose momentum instead of receiving fresh energy from your reaction. This does not mean remaining silent in situations involving injustice or genuine harm. Wisdom still requires speaking when speaking serves a meaningful purpose. The important distinction is learning to recognize when words create clarity and when they merely extend emotional struggle. Many conflicts continue only because both sides believe the next sentence will finally settle everything. More often than not, it simply gives the disagreement another reason to survive. Something quietly changes inside you when you stop measuring your value by another person's agreement. Their approval becomes pleasant rather than necessary. Their criticism becomes information rather than identity. You begin noticing that someone else's inability to understand you does not automatically diminish your character. Likewise, someone else's praise does not suddenly complete it. Your sense of self becomes less dependent on external reactions because it is built upon something steadier than temporary opinions. That shift creates a remarkable kind of freedom. You no longer feel obligated to chase acceptance from everyone you meet or defend yourself against every misunderstanding that appears along the way. This freedom also transforms the emotional atmosphere surrounding difficult conversations. You become more willing to listen because you are no longer listening only for threats. Curiosity gradually replaces defensiveness. Instead of assuming the other person intends to attack you, you become interested in understanding why they see the situation differently. Even when agreement never arrives, mutual respect has a greater chance of surviving. Many disagreements become smaller simply because one person refused to add more emotional weight to them. Calm often has a quiet influence that loud arguments rarely achieve. It invites reflection instead of resistance. Over time, you begin recognizing that true strength is not demonstrated by dominating every conversation or proving yourself in every debate. It appears in your ability to remain composed when circumstances invite you to lose yourself. It shows itself when your words are guided by intention rather than impulse, when your silence carries confidence instead of resentment, and when your peace no longer depends upon convincing everyone else that you deserve it. Once that understanding becomes part of the way you live, conflict loses much of its power to disturb you. You still participate when necessary, speak honestly when appropriate, and defend what genuinely matters, but you no longer mistake constant reaction for courage. The deepest confidence often reveals itself through restraint, and in that restraint, you discover that your self-worth has quietly moved beyond the reach of another person's approval. That silence is often misunderstood because it does not resemble the kind of strength the world usually celebrates. It does not demand attention, interrupt conversations, or force other people to acknowledge it. Instead, it exists quietly beneath the surface, almost invisible to anyone who is only watching your outward behavior. Someone speaks harshly, and nothing dramatic happens. Someone questions your choices, and you do not rush to defend yourself. Someone tries to provoke a reaction, yet the moment passes without the emotional explosion they expected. From the outside, it may appear as though nothing happened at all. Inside, however, something far more significant has taken place. A decision was made. You chose not to allow the first emotional impulse to become the final expression of your character. That choice may last only a few seconds, but those few seconds often determine whether the rest of your day belongs to you or to someone else's behavior. Many people assume that remaining calm means pretending not to care. They believe composure requires becoming emotionally distant, disconnected, or indifferent to what happens around them. That misunderstanding causes countless people to reject self-control because they fear it will make them cold. The reality is almost the opposite. Genuine restraint does not erase emotion. It allows you to experience emotion fully without allowing it to seize control of your judgment. You still feel disappointment when trust is broken. You still experience sadness when something meaningful is lost. You still recognize frustration when life refuses to cooperate with your plans. The difference is that those emotions no longer become immediate instructions telling you what to do next. They become experiences to observe rather than commands that must be obeyed. This distinction is easy to overlook because strong emotions naturally create urgency. Anger tells you to respond immediately. Fear tells you to escape before thinking. Embarrassment encourages you to explain yourself as quickly as possible. Pride insists that silence will be mistaken for weakness unless you defend yourself without delay. Each emotion arrives carrying the promise that immediate action will solve the discomfort it creates. Yet acting quickly and acting wisely are rarely the same thing. The first reaction often satisfies the emotion, but it does not always serve the person experiencing it. A harsh sentence spoken in anger may provide temporary relief while creating lasting regret. An impulsive decision made from fear may remove immediate discomfort while quietly limiting future growth. Emotional urgency often feels convincing precisely because it leaves so little room for reflection. This is where true self-control begins to separate itself from suppression. Suppression pushes emotion into the background while pretending it no longer exists. It refuses to acknowledge disappointment, frustration, or sadness because those feelings seem inconvenient or uncomfortable. At first, that approach may appear effective. Outwardly, everything seems calm. Inwardly, however, nothing has been resolved. As Carl Jung observed, what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. The emotion remains present, waiting for another opportunity to surface. It gathers strength beneath forced silence until one ordinary moment becomes unexpectedly overwhelming. A small inconvenience suddenly produces an enormous reaction, leaving you wondering why something so minor affected you so deeply. The answer is often that it never was about that single moment. It was the accumulated weight of emotions that had been hidden rather than understood. Self-control follows a completely different path. Instead of denying emotion, it becomes curious about it. You notice irritation without immediately acting upon it. You recognize disappointment without allowing it to define the entire day. You admit that something hurt without convincing yourself that the pain must now determine your next decision. This approach requires honesty because it asks you to acknowledge your inner experience exactly as it is. There is no need to pretend you are unaffected. There is no reward for convincing yourself that nothing matters. Emotional maturity is not measured by how little you feel. It is measured by how skillfully you carry what you feel without allowing it to control the direction of your life. As this awareness develops, your relationship with difficult emotions begins to change. Instead of treating them like enemies that must be defeated, you begin seeing them as signals pointing towards something worthy of attention. Frustration may reveal an expectation you did not realize you were carrying. Anxiety may uncover uncertainty you have been trying to ignore. Anger may expose a boundary that needs to be communicated more clearly rather than defended through emotional force. Once emotions become sources of information instead of rulers demanding obedience, they lose much of their ability to overwhelm you. They still appear, but they no longer arrive carrying unquestioned authority. This quieter way of responding often surprises the people around you. They expect immediate resistance because that is what they are accustomed to receiving. They expect defensiveness after criticism, impatience during disagreement, or resentment after disappointment. When those familiar reactions never arrive, the entire dynamic begins to shift. Calm has a remarkable way of interrupting patterns that emotional conflict depends upon. Many arguments survive only because each reaction fuels the next one. Remove that fuel, and the conflict frequently loses its momentum. Your restraint is no longer serving only you. It quietly changes the emotional atmosphere of the interaction itself. None of this suggests that calm is effortless. There will still be moments when frustration rises faster than wisdom. Old habits will occasionally return before you even notice them. Certain situations will continue touching places within you that remain sensitive despite your best efforts. Progress is not measured by becoming emotionally untouchable. It is measured by how quickly awareness returns once emotion begins pulling you away from yourself. Each time you pause instead of reacting, each time you observe instead of exploding, and each time you choose clarity over impulse, you strengthen a habit that gradually becomes part of your character. Eventually, calm stops feeling like something you perform and starts becoming something you naturally embody. People may interpret that composure however they choose. Some will admire it, others may misunderstand it. Neither response changes what it truly represents. It is not passivity, it is not emotional distance. It is the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your inner world no longer needs to mirror every disturbance around you. That confidence cannot be borrowed from praise or taken away by criticism because it was built through repeated moments of deliberate restraint. Once that realization settles deeply within you, silence no longer feels empty. It becomes evidence that your decisions belong to your judgment rather than your impulses, and that quiet mastery is one of the strongest forms of strength a person can develop. As your responses become slower and more deliberate, something else begins changing beneath the surface. The world itself does not suddenly become easier. Delays still happen. Plans still fall apart. People still speak carelessly, forget their promises, and act according to moods you cannot predict. The difference is that these moments no longer settle into your mind with the same weight they once carried. They still arrive, but they do not stay as long. They resemble passing clouds instead of permanent storms. You begin noticing that many of the frustrations which once consumed entire days now occupy only a few minutes before quietly fading away. That change feels almost invisible at first, yet it marks one of the most important shifts a person can experience. You stop treating every inconvenience as a defining event and start recognizing it as another ordinary part of living. Much of life's emotional exhaustion comes from assigning extraordinary importance to ordinary difficulties. A delayed train becomes evidence that the entire day is ruined. A slow line at the grocery store somehow turns into proof that nothing ever goes smoothly. A missed opportunity feels as though every future opportunity has disappeared with it. The mind has a remarkable ability to expand small moments until they seem far larger than they truly are. It does this because attention naturally magnifies whatever it continues to observe. The longer you stare at a frustration, the more significant it appears. The longer you replay an inconvenience, the more permanent it begins to feel. Before long, a temporary event quietly transforms into an emotional identity. You stop saying, "Something frustrating happened," and begin feeling as though you are living inside frustration itself. As awareness grows, you begin catching this process while it is still unfolding. You notice how quickly your thoughts attempt to turn a single inconvenience into a much larger story. One unexpected setback becomes the beginning of a narrative about bad luck. One mistake becomes evidence that you are falling behind. One disappointing conversation suddenly seems connected to every disappointment that came before it. Instead of following that familiar path automatically, you pause long enough to recognize what is happening. The event remains exactly as it is, but the story surrounding it no longer expands without your permission. That simple difference prevents countless ordinary moments from becoming emotional burdens you continue carrying long after they have ended. Perspective quietly becomes one of your greatest strengths. You begin asking yourself whether this particular frustration will matter next week, next month, or next year. Often the honest answer is no. That realization does not erase the inconvenience, but it places it back into its proper proportion. A delayed appointment remains inconvenient, but it is no longer a personal attack. A rude stranger remains unpleasant, but their behavior no longer deserves unlimited space inside your thoughts. An unexpected obstacle may still require effort, patience, or adjustment, yet it stops becoming evidence that life itself is working against you. The situation remains temporary because you no longer feed it with unnecessary emotional resistance. This quieter perspective also changes the rhythm of your daily life. Instead of rushing from one irritation to the next, you begin creating small moments of mental distance throughout the day. A traffic jam becomes time to breathe instead of another reason to become angry. Waiting no longer feels entirely wasted because your peace is not measured by how quickly circumstances obey your schedule. Even interruptions begin losing much of their power because your emotional balance is no longer built upon perfect efficiency. You discover that much of your previous frustration came from believing every moment had to unfold exactly as planned. Once that expectation softens, patience becomes far more natural than forcing yourself to remain calm ever could. People often assume resilience appears during life's biggest challenges, but its true foundation is usually built during ordinary moments that seem too small to matter. Each time you refuse to exaggerate a minor inconvenience, you strengthen the habit of emotional balance. Each time you decline to replay a disappointing interaction for the rest of the evening, you teach your mind that not every unpleasant experience deserves permanent attention. These small decisions accumulate quietly. No single moment transforms your character, but hundreds of ordinary responses slowly shape the person you become. Long before a major crisis arrives, your everyday habits have already determined how prepared your mind will be to meet it. This gradual transformation also changes how other people experience your presence. They begin noticing that situations which once frustrated you no longer produce the same reactions. You become less hurried, less defensive, and less easily unsettled. That steadiness has a calming effect beyond yourself. Composure often spreads without words because emotional states naturally influence the people nearby. When someone refuses to contribute additional tension to an already difficult situation, the entire atmosphere begins shifting. Calm becomes quietly contagious in much the same way anxiety once was. You are no longer adding unnecessary weight to every challenge. Instead, your presence begins making challenges feel lighter for everyone involved. None of this means difficult days disappear. Some disappointments still hurt deeply because they involve genuine loss rather than simple inconvenience. Some setbacks deserve grief, reflection, and time. Emotional maturity does not require treating serious hardship as though it were insignificant. It simply prevents ordinary frustrations from exhausting the strength you may one day need for life's truly meaningful trials. By refusing to spend your emotional energy on every small irritation, you preserve something valuable. Your attention remains available for what genuinely deserves it. Your patience lasts longer. Your judgment remains clearer. Your peace becomes less dependent on circumstances that change by the hour. Eventually, this way of living becomes so familiar that you hardly notice it happening. Small frustrations continue passing through your life, just as changing weather passes across the sky. Some days are brighter than others. Some are more difficult. None of them remain forever. You stop expecting perfect conditions before allowing yourself to feel settled. Instead, stability comes from recognizing that passing discomfort does not have to become lasting suffering unless you continually invite it to stay. That realization creates a quiet confidence that cannot easily be disturbed because it is rooted in perspective rather than convenience. Life continues moving with all its unpredictability, but your inner world no longer rises and falls with every passing inconvenience. It remains steady, patient, and grounded, allowing everyday chaos to remain exactly what it has always been: temporary. Acceptance often carries a reputation it never deserved. Many people hear the word and immediately imagine giving up, lowering their standards, or allowing life to push them wherever it chooses. They picture someone who no longer cares enough to resist difficulty or pursue something better. That picture could not be further from the truth. Real acceptance has nothing to do with becoming passive. It begins with the simple decision to stop fighting facts that already exist. A plan changed. Someone disappointed you. An opportunity disappeared. A mistake was made. None of those realities become easier simply because the mind insists they should not have happened. Resistance may feel productive because it creates the illusion that you are still doing something, but arguing with reality after it has already unfolded only traps your attention inside a moment that cannot be rewritten. This is why so much emotional exhaustion comes from events that are already over. The conversation ended hours ago, yet your thoughts continue searching for different words. The decision has already been made, yet part of your mind keeps negotiating with an outcome that no longer exists. Reality quietly moves forward, while your attention remains anchored to a version of events that disappeared the moment it failed to happen. The strange part is that this habit often feels responsible. It convinces you that replaying everything will somehow protect you from future disappointment. Instead, it usually creates a second layer of suffering that has nothing to do with the original event. The difficulty happened once. Your resistance repeats it again and again. The less you demand that life unfold according to your private expectations, the lighter your inner world becomes. That does not mean lowering your hopes or abandoning meaningful goals. You can still work with discipline, pursue excellence, and care deeply about the direction of your life. The difference is that your emotional balance no longer depends upon every detail unfolding exactly as you imagined. You stop confusing preference with necessity. Of course, you would prefer honesty over dishonesty, success over failure, kindness over cruelty, certainty over confusion. Those preferences remain completely reasonable. Problems begin only when the mind quietly decides that peace is impossible unless every preference becomes reality. Life has never made that promise, and expecting it to do so places your emotional stability in circumstances that were never fully yours to control. Freedom begins appearing in unexpected places once that realization settles into your thinking. A delayed opportunity becomes an invitation to adapt instead of a reason to become discouraged. Someone else's poor behavior becomes information about their character rather than a verdict on your worth. Even uncertainty starts feeling different because you no longer expect every unanswered question to be resolved immediately. Instead of needing constant reassurance, you gradually become comfortable carrying temporary uncertainty without allowing it to consume your attention. That quiet confidence grows because your peace is no longer built upon predictions about the future. It is built upon your ability to meet whatever future eventually arrives. This shift also changes the way you relate to disappointment itself. Instead of asking why something happened to you, your attention naturally moves toward understanding what the situation now requires. One question keeps you trapped inside resistance. The other moves you toward action. Reality becomes easier to work with once you stop demanding that it becomes something else first. This does not erase sadness or frustration. Those emotions remain part of being human. They simply stop becoming permanent obstacles because they are no longer strengthened by endless arguments with facts that cannot be changed. Acceptance creates room for emotion without allowing emotion to become the only voice shaping your next decision. Many people underestimate how much energy is quietly consumed by wishing the present were different. That energy rarely feels dramatic because it is scattered across hundreds of ordinary moments. Complaining internally about traffic, resisting unexpected changes, becoming irritated by delays, holding on to resentment because someone refused to behave the way you hoped they would. None of these moments seem especially significant on their own, yet together they shape the emotional atmosphere of an entire life. When resistance becomes a habit, peace always feels just out of reach because reality never stops presenting situations that fail to match personal expectations. There will always be another inconvenience waiting tomorrow if your calm depends upon perfect conditions. The remarkable thing is that reality becomes easier to navigate once you stop demanding that it cooperate with every desire. Clear thinking replaces emotional urgency. Patience becomes more available because your attention is no longer divided between what exists and what you wish existed instead. You begin responding to life as it is, rather than exhausting yourself reacting to the difference between reality and imagination. That difference may sound subtle, but it changes nearly everything. Better decisions emerge because they are built upon facts instead of frustration. Better relationships develop because you stop expecting other people to satisfy expectations they never agreed to carry. Better emotional balance follows because your mind spends less time resisting what has already happened and more time deciding what can still be done. This way of living does not remove unpredictability from life. People will continue making mistakes. Circumstances will continue changing without permission. Plans will still unravel despite careful preparation. None of that disappears. What disappears is the constant belief that your peace must disappear with it. Acceptance becomes the foundation that allows wisdom to move forward. Once reality is seen clearly instead of resisted endlessly, your energy is finally available for something far more meaningful than complaint. It becomes available for thoughtful action, steady judgment, and quiet resilience. That is where genuine freedom grows, not from controlling the world around you, but from refusing to let your inner world remain trapped in a fight against what is already true. From that place of acceptance, your relationship with other people begins changing in ways that are difficult to notice at first. They have not become easier to deal with. They still forget what they promised. They still make careless decisions, speak from emotion, and occasionally disappoint you without intending to. The difference is no longer found in their behavior, it is found in the way you interpret it. Instead of immediately assuming that every unpleasant interaction revolves around you, you begin recognizing something that was always true but rarely considered. Every person you meet is carrying an inner world that remains almost completely invisible. They arrive with private fears, unfinished conversations, personal disappointments, quiet insecurities, physical exhaustion, family struggles, financial pressure, regrets they never mention, and burdens that never become part of the conversation. You only witness a brief moment of their lives, yet it is tempting to believe that brief moment explains everything about them. This realization naturally softens many of the conclusions you once reached so quickly. A sharp response from someone no longer automatically feels like evidence that they dislike you. A distracted expression does not immediately become proof that you have done something wrong. Someone's impatience may have begun long before they ever crossed your path. Their frustration may belong to a difficult morning, an argument at home, disappointing news, or responsibilities you know nothing about. That does not suddenly make unpleasant behavior enjoyable, but it changes the emotional weight you choose to carry afterward. Instead of absorbing another person's emotional state as though it were your own responsibility, you begin seeing it as part of their journey rather than your identity. One of the mind's oldest habits is placing itself at the center of every interaction. Someone becomes quiet, and your thoughts immediately search for something you must have done. A friend cancels plans, and the mind quietly wonders whether your presence mattered less than you believed. A coworker seems distant, and your attention begins constructing explanations before a single fact has appeared. This habit feels convincing because your own experience is the only one you directly live every day. Everything naturally appears connected to you. As Epictetus reminded us, it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Yet reality is far more complex. People often make decisions for reasons that have nothing to do with your worth, your character, or your actions. Understanding this removes countless unnecessary emotional burdens that were created entirely through assumption. This perspective also protects you from another quiet trap. When someone behaves poorly, the instinctive reaction is often to carry their emotional state with you long after the interaction has ended. Their irritation becomes your irritation. Their anger quietly shapes your mood. Their anxiety begins influencing your thoughts. Without realizing it, you become a temporary home for emotions that never belonged to you. Hours later, they may have forgotten the conversation completely while you continue replaying it in your mind. Their difficult moment has become your difficult day. Recognizing this pattern creates an opportunity to interrupt it. You can acknowledge another person's emotions without adopting them as your own. Compassion does not require emotional possession. This does not mean becoming naive or pretending harmful behavior should simply be accepted without boundaries. Some people repeatedly choose dishonesty, manipulation, or disrespect. Healthy relationships still require clear limits, honest conversations, and the willingness to walk away when necessary. Understanding another person's struggles is not the same as permitting destructive behavior to continue unchecked. Wisdom asks for both compassion and discernment. You can recognize that someone is acting from pain while also deciding that their pain does not give them permission to create unnecessary pain in your own life. Those two truths exist comfortably beside one another without contradiction. Learning this balance changes the emotional atmosphere of your relationships. You stop trying to fix every person you encounter because you recognize that lasting change has never been something another individual can force upon someone else. Advice only reaches people who are ready to receive it. Kindness cannot remove every insecurity. Patience cannot solve every internal struggle. You begin offering understanding without carrying the impossible responsibility of transforming another person's life. That release is surprisingly freeing because it allows you to care deeply without becoming emotionally consumed by outcomes that were never fully within your control. The more you observe people through this quieter perspective, the more humility naturally develops. You become slower to judge because you recognize how little information you actually possess. Every stranger has a history you cannot see. Every friend carries thoughts they may never fully express. Even those closest to you continue experiencing parts of life that remain private. Realizing this encourages curiosity instead of certainty. Instead of assuming you already understand someone's intentions, you become willing to leave room for possibilities your first impression completely overlooked. That willingness prevents many unnecessary conflicts before they even begin. Something equally important begins happening within yourself. As you become more patient with the hidden struggles of others, you often become more patient with your own. You stop expecting immediate perfection from yourself because you understand that growth unfolds gradually for everyone. The compassion you extend outward quietly finds its way inward as well. Mistakes become opportunities to learn rather than permanent evidence of failure. Progress becomes more meaningful than flawless performance. That shift creates a steadier foundation because your emotional life is no longer built upon impossible standards for yourself or for anyone else. Over time, this way of seeing people transforms ordinary interactions. Instead of entering each conversation prepared for disappointment, you approach it with quiet openness. You remain aware that others may misunderstand you, disagree with you, or occasionally treat you unfairly. None of those possibilities disappear. They simply stop defining your expectations. You no longer carry another person's emotional weight as though it were your own responsibility to solve. You respond with clarity where you can, establish boundaries where necessary, and allow people the freedom to carry the consequences of their own choices. That quiet separation protects your peace without closing your heart. It allows kindness to remain genuine because it is no longer dependent upon controlling how other people choose to behave, and that is one of the most liberating forms of emotional freedom a person can discover. As this understanding grows stronger, another burden begins losing its grip almost without you noticing. Resentment no longer feels as convincing as it once did. It still appears after painful experiences, but it becomes harder to justify carrying it for weeks, months, or even years. At first, holding on to anger often feels like an act of strength. It feels as though refusing to let go protects your dignity or honors what happened. Part of the mind quietly believes that releasing resentment somehow excuses the person who caused the pain. It fears that moving forward will erase the seriousness of what took place. Yet time slowly reveals something different. The event already happened. The damage it caused belonged to that moment. What continues hurting you now is often the habit of returning to it again and again, allowing an experience that ended long ago to remain active inside your present life. The mind has a remarkable ability to preserve emotional pain through memory alone. Nothing new has to happen. A familiar place, a passing thought, or an ordinary conversation can suddenly bring an old wound back into sharp focus. Your body reacts as though the situation is happening again, even though only the memory is present. The heart begins beating faster. Old emotions return. Thoughts immediately continue the story from where they left off years earlier. Memory is powerful because it does not always distinguish clearly between what is happening now and what once happened before. Each replay quietly renews the emotional experience. The original event may have lasted only minutes, but the mind extends it across months simply by refusing to stop reliving it. This is why resentment quietly steals so much of your life without asking permission. It convinces you that you are protecting yourself while gradually trapping your attention inside the past. The person who disappointed you may have continued living their life long ago. Circumstances have changed, years may have passed, entire chapters of your life may have unfolded since then. Yet part of your emotional world remains standing in the exact place where the injury first occurred. Without realizing it, you begin measuring present experiences through old pain. New relationships become difficult because yesterday's betrayal continues influencing today's trust. New opportunities feel uncertain because previous failures still shape your expectations. The past quietly extends its reach into moments that never belonged to it. One reason resentment survives for so long is because it often disguises itself as justice. It whispers that letting go means pretending nothing happened. It suggests that holding on to anger proves you respect yourself enough to remember the wrong that was done. At first, this feels reasonable. No one wants genuine harm to be ignored. No one wants painful experiences to be treated as meaningless. Yet justice and emotional captivity are not the same thing. Remembering a lesson does not require carrying the emotional weight forever. You can learn from betrayal without allowing betrayal to become your permanent identity. You can recognize someone's harmful choices without allowing those choices to continue shaping your inner world every single day. This does not mean forgiveness must happen immediately or that healing follows a simple schedule. Some wounds are deep because the losses they represent were real. Trust may have been broken, relationships may have ended, opportunities may have disappeared forever. Those experiences deserve honesty rather than forced positivity. Real healing rarely begins by pretending the pain never existed. It begins by acknowledging exactly what happened without continuing to feed it through endless repetition. There is an important difference between remembering something and repeatedly reopening it. One preserves wisdom. The other quietly preserves suffering. As this distinction becomes clearer, you begin asking different questions. Instead of wondering why the past still hurts, you become curious about why your attention keeps returning there. What part of you still believes another replay will finally change what already happened? The answer is often surprisingly simple. The mind keeps searching for an ending that reality never provided. It wants an apology that never arrived. It wants an explanation that would somehow make everything understandable. It wants certainty where life offered only disappointment. Unfortunately, no amount of revisiting the memory can produce what the original moment failed to provide. The search continues only because the mind struggles to accept that some questions remain unanswered. Learning to release resentment begins with accepting that painful experiences do not need perfect endings before you are allowed to move forward. Some people never understand the harm they caused. Others may never admit it, even if they do. Waiting for complete resolution quietly places your peace in the hands of circumstances that may never change. Freedom begins when you stop making your emotional well-being dependent upon something outside your control. You are no longer saying that what happened was acceptable. You are simply deciding that your future deserves more attention than your past. That decision returns your energy to the only place where it can still accomplish something meaningful, the present moment. As your attention gradually leaves old resentment behind, something unexpected begins replacing it. Space appears where emotional tension once lived. That space is not empty. It becomes available for patience, gratitude, creativity, deeper relationships, and a clearer understanding of yourself. The energy once consumed by replaying painful memories quietly becomes available for building a different future. You notice that ordinary moments feel lighter because they are no longer constantly compared to yesterday's disappointments. Life slowly becomes something you experience directly instead of something filtered through unresolved pain. Eventually, letting go stops feeling like losing something important. It begins feeling like finally setting down a weight that was never meant to be carried forever. The past remains part of your story, but it no longer dictates the emotional atmosphere of your present life. The lessons remain, the wisdom remains, even the memory remains. What disappears is the constant belief that yesterday must somehow become different before today can finally be peaceful. That quiet release changes everything because it reminds you that your future has never depended upon rewriting the past. It depends upon deciding that the past no longer deserves unlimited authority over the life still waiting to be lived. With fewer emotional burdens weighing on your mind, you begin noticing a change that is difficult to describe but impossible to ignore. Calm no longer feels like something you accidentally stumble upon during good days. It begins appearing even when circumstances remain imperfect. You wake up to unexpected problems without immediately feeling overwhelmed. Conversations that once drained your energy no longer linger in your thoughts for hours. Small frustrations still appear, but they lose their ability to pull you completely away from yourself. The world has not become quieter. It has not suddenly become more predictable or more considerate. What has changed is the relationship between your inner world and everything happening outside it. That relationship is no longer built upon constant reaction. It is built upon repeated choices, and those choices slowly become habits that shape your character more deeply than any single experience ever could. This transformation rarely arrives through one powerful realization. It develops almost unnoticed through ordinary moments that seem too small to matter. One day, you decide not to replay a conversation after it ends. Another day, you choose patience instead of irritation while waiting for something beyond your control. A week later, you notice yourself accepting criticism without immediately becoming defensive. None of these moments appear extraordinary on their own. They feel almost insignificant while they are happening, yet each one quietly strengthens the same habit. Each decision teaches your mind that peace does not need to disappear simply because life refuses to cooperate. The repetition matters far more than the intensity. Character is not built through occasional moments of perfection. It is shaped through countless ordinary choices that gradually become your natural way of responding. Many people wait for life to become easier before expecting themselves to feel calmer. They believe peace will finally arrive after the stressful season ends, after the difficult relationship improves, after finances become stable, or after uncertainty finally disappears. The problem with that approach is that life continues presenting new challenges almost as soon as old ones fade away. If your emotional balance depends upon perfect conditions, then balance remains permanently postponed. There will always be another inconvenience, another disappointment, another unexpected obstacle waiting just beyond the horizon. Calm built upon favorable circumstances remains fragile because favorable circumstances never remain permanent. Lasting steadiness grows differently. It develops while life is still imperfect, proving itself precisely because conditions are not ideal. As this habit becomes stronger, difficult interactions begin serving a completely different purpose. Instead of viewing them as interruptions to your peace, you begin recognizing them as opportunities to strengthen it. Someone speaks impatiently, and rather than seeing only their behavior, you also notice your own response unfolding. A plan unexpectedly changes, and instead of immediately resisting it, you observe the familiar urge to become frustrated before gently choosing another direction. Each challenge becomes quiet practice. The situation itself may remain unpleasant, but it is no longer meaningless. It offers another chance to reinforce the habits you have been carefully building. Progress stops depending upon avoiding difficulty and begins depending upon how you meet it. This shift changes the emotional atmosphere of your entire day. Instead of constantly asking whether circumstances are good enough for you to remain calm, you begin asking whether your response reflects the kind of person you are becoming. That question carries far more stability because it places responsibility back where it belongs. External events continue changing from one hour to the next. Your values remain available in every moment regardless of those changes. Patience is still possible during inconvenience. Honesty remains possible during conflict. Thoughtfulness remains available even when emotions invite haste. The more often you return to those choices, the less they feel like effort. They begin resembling instinct, quietly replacing older habits that once reacted automatically to every challenge. This gradual consistency also changes the way you see setbacks within your own growth. There will still be moments when frustration wins. You will occasionally speak too quickly, judge too harshly, or carry unnecessary tension longer than you intended. Earlier in life, those moments may have convinced you that all previous progress had disappeared. Now they begin serving a different purpose. They remind you that growth is measured across years rather than individual afternoons. One difficult day no longer erases months of careful practice. One emotional reaction does not define your identity. Instead of becoming discouraged, you recover more quickly because you recognize that returning to balance matters far more than never losing it in the first place. People around you gradually begin noticing this change, even if they cannot fully explain it. They see someone who no longer becomes consumed by every inconvenience. They notice that criticism no longer produces immediate defensiveness. They observe patience appearing where impatience once seemed automatic. These changes often speak more loudly than any advice you could offer. Calm has a quiet influence because it creates a sense of stability that others naturally recognize. It reminds them that another way of responding is possible without ever needing to announce itself. The greatest evidence of inner discipline is rarely found in dramatic speeches or impressive achievements. It is revealed through ordinary moments handled with uncommon steadiness. Eventually, this steadiness becomes less like a skill you consciously practice and more like a part of who you are. You stop wondering whether you will be able to remain composed because composure has become familiar. The habits you once repeated intentionally now arise almost naturally. As Aristotle observed, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. You still pay attention to your thoughts, remain aware of your emotions, and continue learning from difficult experiences. But those practices no longer feel separate from daily life. They become woven into the way you think, speak, and move through ordinary situations. Emotional balance transforms from an occasional success into a dependable foundation, supporting everything else you do. Looking back, the greatest change is not that life became easier, it is that your relationship with life became steadier. The same world continues presenting uncertainty, disappointment, success, failure, kindness, and conflict in unpredictable ways. None of those experiences disappear. What disappears is the constant belief that your peace must rise and fall alongside them. Calm no longer feels borrowed from fortunate circumstances. It belongs to you because it has been patiently built through repeated choices, strengthened by ordinary challenges, and protected through quiet discipline. Once it becomes part of your identity, rather than something you occasionally achieve, everyday life loses much of its power to shake you, and that quiet stability becomes one of the greatest freedoms you can ever possess. As this quiet confidence becomes part of the way you live, something else begins changing that you may not notice before other people do. The atmosphere around you feels different. You enter the same rooms, speak to the same people, and face the same situations, yet your presence no longer carries the restless energy that once searched for approval or reassurance. Instead of wondering how you are being perceived, your attention remains focused on understanding what is actually happening around you. That subtle shift changes far more than your own experience. People naturally sense when someone is comfortable without needing constant validation. It is difficult to explain because it is not created through appearance, status, or carefully chosen words. It comes from a steadiness that cannot be easily imitated. When someone no longer depends upon every conversation to confirm their worth, they begin bringing a quiet stability into every interaction, and that stability has a way of influencing the emotional tone of the entire room. Many people assume influence belongs to the loudest voice. They believe confidence is measured by how quickly someone speaks, how often they interrupt, or how forcefully they defend their opinions. Modern life often rewards visibility, making it easy to believe that constant expression is the same thing as genuine strength. Yet if you observe the people who consistently earn lasting respect, A different pattern often appears. They rarely rush to fill silence simply because silence exists. They do not compete for attention in every conversation. They listen carefully before deciding whether their words are necessary. When they finally choose to speak, people naturally become more attentive because their words have not been weakened through constant repetition. Restraint quietly increases the value of expression in a way endless talking never can. This does not happen because they possess perfect knowledge or extraordinary charisma. It happens because calm changes the quality of attention you give to other people. When your mind is no longer occupied with defending your image, proving your intelligence, or searching for hidden criticism, you become capable of truly listening. You hear not only the words being spoken, but also the emotions behind them. You notice hesitation, uncertainty, excitement, and fear without immediately making the conversation about yourself. That kind of attention is surprisingly rare. Many conversations consist of two people waiting for their turn to speak, rather than genuinely trying to understand one another. The person who listens with patience naturally becomes someone others feel comfortable trusting because they sense they are finally being heard instead of merely answered. Trust develops quietly through consistency rather than performance. It grows when your reactions become predictable in the healthiest possible way. People learn that they do not have to fear emotional explosions over small mistakes. They begin expecting thoughtful responses instead of impulsive judgments. They notice that disagreement does not immediately become conflict and that criticism does not instantly produce defensiveness. Over time, this consistency creates a feeling of safety. Others know where they stand because your behavior is no longer determined by every passing emotion. They may not consciously recognize why they feel more relaxed around you, but they experience the difference nonetheless. Calm has a stabilizing effect because it reduces uncertainty instead of adding to it. Ironically, the less interested you become in impressing people, the more authentic your influence often becomes. Desperation has a way of revealing itself even when hidden beneath confidence. People can usually sense when someone is speaking primarily to gain approval, appear knowledgeable, or establish superiority. Those motives create subtle tension because they shift attention away from truth and toward personal image. When those motives begin fading, conversations become lighter. You no longer need every interaction to prove something about yourself. That freedom allows honesty to replace performance. You become willing to admit uncertainty, acknowledge mistakes, and change your perspective when new understanding appears. Far from weakening your credibility, this openness often strengthens it because people trust sincerity far more than perfection. Another quiet transformation begins taking place as well. You become less reactive to the emotional atmosphere created by others. If someone enters the room frustrated, you no longer feel compelled to mirror their frustration. If anxiety spreads through a group, you remain capable of observing it without immediately absorbing it as your own. This does not make you emotionally distant. It makes you emotionally anchored. Your mood is no longer automatically determined by the strongest emotion nearby. Instead, you become a steady point within changing circumstances. That steadiness often encourages others to slow down without realizing why. Emotional states naturally influence those around us, and calm is no exception. It spreads quietly through example rather than instruction. This kind of influence cannot be manufactured through techniques alone because it grows from inner consistency rather than outward strategy. People are rarely persuaded by words that are disconnected from the way someone actually lives. They notice the difference between advice and example. Anyone can describe patience during peaceful moments. Demonstrating patience when circumstances become difficult carries a different kind of credibility altogether. Anyone can speak about composure in theory. Remaining composed while facing criticism, uncertainty, or disappointment quietly communicates something far more convincing than explanation ever could. Character speaks continuously, even during silence, because people observe actions long before they fully believe words. Over time, you stop thinking about influence as something you acquire. It becomes a natural consequence of governing yourself well. You are no longer trying to control how others think, feel, or behave. You understand that those choices belong to them, just as your own choices belong to you. Paradoxically, releasing the desire to control people often makes your presence more meaningful. Others become curious because they encounter someone who is not competing for attention, demanding agreement, or chasing admiration. They encounter someone who remains grounded regardless of changing circumstances. And that quiet confidence leaves a deeper impression than loud certainty ever could. Eventually, you realize that the strongest form of influence has never depended on having the final word or winning every conversation. It comes from becoming the kind of person whose actions consistently reflect inner steadiness, thoughtful judgment, and genuine presence. Those qualities cannot be forced, borrowed, or performed for long. They emerge naturally when your attention is no longer consumed by proving yourself, and your energy is no longer scattered across unnecessary conflicts. By learning to govern your own mind first, you create a presence that quietly encourages the same possibility in others. That influence is subtle, lasting, and deeply human because it begins where every meaningful transformation truly starts, within yourself. Even after all these changes begin taking root, one important truth remains. The journey never truly reaches a final destination. There is no morning when you wake up completely beyond frustration, entirely untouched by disappointment, or permanently free from emotional struggle. Life continues presenting new situations, unfamiliar people, unexpected losses, and moments that test everything you thought you had mastered. At first, this realization may sound discouraging, but it quietly contains something deeply reassuring. You are not failing because difficult emotions continue appearing. You are simply participating in the same process that every thoughtful human being has always faced. Growth is not about reaching a place where challenges disappear. It is about becoming someone who meets those challenges with increasing clarity instead of increasing confusion. This changes the way you look at difficult days. Earlier in life, one emotional reaction may have convinced you that all your progress had vanished. One impatient response, one anxious afternoon, or one unnecessary argument could make it seem as though you had returned to the beginning. That conclusion often creates even more frustration because the mind starts criticizing itself for not being better already. Yet progress has never moved in a perfectly straight line. Some days everything seems to come naturally. Patience appears without effort. Perspective remains steady. Decisions feel thoughtful instead of rushed. Then another day arrives when fatigue, stress, or disappointment shortens your patience before you even realize it. Neither day defines who you are becoming. They simply reveal different parts of the same ongoing practice. This understanding removes a great deal of unnecessary pressure. Instead of demanding perfection from yourself, you begin expecting honesty. Instead of measuring your growth by whether you experience difficult emotions, you begin measuring it by how you responded once you became aware of them. That is a far more meaningful standard because it reflects something you can actually influence. You cannot prevent every emotional reaction from appearing. Your mind has spent years developing familiar patterns, and some of them will continue surfacing from time to time. What gradually changes is your relationship with those patterns. They stop controlling your decisions for as long as they once did. Awareness returns more quickly. Reflection replaces impulse sooner. Recovery becomes gentler because you are no longer fighting yourself while trying to regain your balance. This is why patience with yourself becomes just as important as patience with other people. Growth built upon constant self-criticism eventually becomes exhausting because every mistake feels like proof that you are still falling short. A calmer approach recognizes something different. Mistakes are information. They reveal where attention drifted, where old habits returned, or where fear briefly became louder than wisdom. Once seen clearly, they become teachers rather than permanent labels. You stop asking why you are imperfect and begin asking what this particular moment can show you. That shift transforms setbacks into part of the path instead of evidence that you have left it. One quiet habit becomes especially valuable during this process. Whenever you notice yourself reacting automatically, instead of becoming discouraged, you simply return. You return to observing your thoughts. You return to slowing your breathing. You return to separating facts from interpretations. You return to remembering that another person's emotions do not have to become your own. This repeated return is far more important than avoiding mistakes altogether. The mind naturally wanders. Emotions naturally rise and fall. The practice lies in recognizing when you have drifted and gently finding your way back again without adding shame to the experience. Over time, these returns become faster. Something that once disturbed you for several days now lasts only an evening. A criticism that previously occupied your thoughts for hours slowly loses its influence after a few minutes of reflection. The difficult conversation still happens, but it no longer defines the emotional atmosphere of your entire week. These changes are easy to overlook because they develop gradually. You may not notice them while they are happening. Then one ordinary afternoon, you realize that something which once would have overwhelmed you now passes through your mind with surprising ease. That quiet realization reveals how much has changed beneath the surface. This also creates a healthier relationship with the future. You stop expecting yourself to handle every challenge perfectly before it arrives. Instead, you trust that whatever appears will become another opportunity to practice the same principles you have been strengthening all along. Confidence no longer comes from believing nothing difficult will happen. It comes from knowing you have repeatedly found your way back before, and you can do so again. That confidence feels steady because it is based on experience rather than optimism. You have seen your own ability to recover, reflect, and continue moving forward despite imperfect moments. Eventually, the practice itself becomes part of your identity. You are no longer someone searching for a life without emotional difficulty. You become someone who understands that clarity is renewed repeatedly, not achieved once forever. Each challenge reminds you rather than defeats you. Each setback becomes another invitation to pay attention instead of another reason to lose hope. The path continues because life continues, and that is exactly as it should be. Lasting peace was never hidden inside flawless performance. It grows quietly through the willingness to begin again each time your attention drifts, each time your emotions move faster than your judgment, and each time you remember that true progress has always been measured not by never losing your balance, but by how gently, honestly, and consistently you return to it. Eventually, something remarkable begins happening almost without your awareness. Calm stops feeling like a destination you occasionally reach after everything goes right. It becomes the place your mind naturally returns to after life reminds you that nothing outside your control will ever remain completely stable. Earlier, peace seemed fragile because it depended on cooperation from the world around you. A pleasant conversation could create it. A difficult interaction could destroy it. A successful day strengthened it. An unexpected setback weakened it. Your emotional state rose and fell alongside circumstances that changed by the hour. Now a quieter foundation begins taking shape. The world continues moving with all its uncertainty, yet your inner balance is no longer carried away by every change in direction. It has learned where home is, and no matter how far emotions briefly wander, they gradually find their way back again. This does not mean unpleasant emotions disappear forever. There will still be moments when disappointment arrives without warning. There will still be mornings that begin with unexpected problems and evenings that end differently than you hoped. Certain conversations will still sting because they involve people and situations that genuinely matter to you. Being grounded never removes your humanity. It simply changes the amount of authority you give each passing experience. You no longer assume that because something feels overwhelming in this moment, it must define the entire day. You stop believing every emotional wave deserves to become a permanent direction. Instead, you allow emotions to move through you the same way changing weather moves across the sky. Some storms last longer than others, but none of them become the sky itself. One of the quietest signs of this transformation is how quickly perspective begins returning after difficult moments. Earlier in life, frustration might have stayed with you for days. One misunderstanding could influence every conversation that followed. One disappointment could quietly shape the way you viewed yourself for weeks. Now recovery becomes gentler. You notice your thoughts beginning to drift toward familiar patterns, but they no longer remain there indefinitely. Awareness quietly interrupts the process before it grows stronger. You remember that one difficult interaction does not erase everything good that also exists. One mistake does not suddenly define your character. One unexpected obstacle does not determine the direction of your entire future. These reminders are not forced affirmations. They arise naturally because they have been practiced often enough to become part of the way you think. This steadiness changes your relationship with uncertainty as well. Earlier, unanswered questions often demanded immediate solutions. The mind searched endlessly for certainty because uncertainty felt unsafe. Gradually, you begin realizing that life has always contained unanswered questions. As Epictetus wrote, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." The difference is that unanswered questions no longer frighten you in the same way. You become willing to continue living while some answers remain unavailable. You no longer need tomorrow to reveal itself before allowing yourself to feel settled today. Patience quietly replaces urgency. Trust replaces constant prediction. Instead of exhausting yourself trying to control every possible outcome, you direct your energy toward meeting each moment with as much clarity as possible. That simple shift creates remarkable freedom because your peace no longer depends upon knowing exactly what comes next. People continue behaving according to their own nature. Some remain generous. Others remain impatient. Some understand you. Others misunderstand you completely despite your best efforts to communicate honestly. Plans continue changing without permission. Unexpected setbacks still arrive without asking whether the timing is convenient. None of these realities disappear simply because your perspective has changed. The important difference is that they no longer possess automatic authority over your inner world. They may influence your circumstances, but they do not immediately determine your emotional condition. That authority quietly returns to where it always belonged. It returns to your own judgment, your own attention, and your own willingness to decide which experiences deserve lasting space within your mind. This realization creates an entirely different kind of confidence. It is not the confidence that believes nothing difficult will ever happen. It is not based upon talent, status, or the approval of other people. It grows from repeated evidence that you can remain yourself even when circumstances refuse to cooperate. You have experienced disappointment without allowing it to become bitterness. You have faced criticism without surrendering your self-respect. You have adapted to change without losing your direction. Those experiences slowly replace fear with quiet trust. You begin believing in your ability to respond wisely because you have practiced returning to yourself again and again. Confidence built this way feels calm because it no longer depends upon proving anything to anyone. Looking back, you begin seeing that your greatest struggles were never created entirely by the world outside you. They were often intensified by the way your mind resisted, interpreted, and carried those experiences long after they had ended. That understanding does not produce regret. Instead, it creates gratitude because it reminds you that the place where suffering was strengthened is also the place where freedom quietly begins. The same mind that once multiplied frustration through expectation can now create peace through clarity. The same attention that once remained trapped inside resentment can now return to the present with greater ease. Nothing magical happened. The world did not suddenly become kinder. You simply learned that your deepest stability was never waiting for perfect circumstances to arrive. Eventually, this becomes less like a philosophy and more like the natural rhythm of your life. You stop chasing calm because you recognize it has never been something the world could permanently give or permanently take away. It becomes the place you return to after every challenge, every disappointment, every unexpected change, and every emotional storm. Life continues unfolding according to its own unpredictable nature. But your inner world is no longer forced to imitate that unpredictability. Lasting peace begins quietly, almost unnoticed, the moment you stop trying to govern everything outside yourself and devote that same attention to governing what has always been within your reach. That is where true freedom has been waiting all along, patient, steady, and untouched by the changing conditions of the world around you. Looking back, you may realize that the greatest victory was never over difficult people, painful circumstances, or unpredictable events. The greatest victory was over the version of yourself that believed peace depended on controlling them. That belief quietly shaped countless decisions without ever introducing itself. It convinced you that life would finally become lighter once everyone understood you, respected your boundaries, kept their promises, and behaved according to your expectations. Each disappointment seemed to confirm that peace was still waiting somewhere in the future, hidden behind better circumstances. But the future kept moving. New people entered your life, old problems disappeared, different challenges arrived, and the same emotional patterns quietly returned because they had never truly belonged to the world outside you. They belonged to the habits of attention, expectation, and interpretation that followed you wherever you went. Recognizing this is not discouraging, it is deeply liberating. If your peace depended entirely upon other people, then you would spend your life waiting for them to become someone they may never choose to be. If your emotional balance depended upon perfect conditions, then you would always feel one unexpected setback away from losing yourself again. Fortunately, neither of those things is true. Every time you pause before reacting, you quietly reclaim authority over your own mind. Every time you refuse to carry someone else's anger into the rest of your day, you strengthen a freedom that cannot be given or taken away by another person. Every moment you choose understanding over assumption, patience over impulse, or clarity over emotional urgency becomes another reminder that your inner world is built through choices rather than circumstances. This way of living does not promise a life without difficulty. It offers something far more valuable. It offers the confidence that whatever life brings tomorrow, you do not have to become a prisoner of your first reaction. You can return to perspective after disappointment. You can remain thoughtful during uncertainty. You can protect your attention when the world constantly demands it. Most importantly, you can remember that no passing emotion deserves permanent authority over the direction of your life. The world will continue changing, people will continue surprising you, and challenges will continue arriving without invitation. Through all of it, the quiet discipline you have been building remains available, waiting patiently each time you choose to return to it. That is the kind of strength that does not need to announce itself, because it quietly shapes every decision, every relationship, and every step you take from this moment forward. By the time you truly understand these ideas, something subtle but irreversible has already begun changing within you. You stop measuring your life by how often difficult things happen and start measuring it by how often those difficulties succeed in taking you away from yourself. That is a completely different standard. It shifts your attention away from chasing a world that never promised to be predictable and toward cultivating a mind that no longer depends on predictability to remain steady. This is where many people unknowingly spend years moving in the wrong direction. They dedicate enormous energy to organizing every external detail, believing that if they can finally eliminate enough uncertainty, disappointment, criticism, and inconvenience, then peace will naturally appear. Yet the more control they gain over one area of life, the more they discover another area waiting to challenge them. The destination keeps moving because it was never located in circumstances to begin with. It was quietly waiting in the way they chose to meet those circumstances all along. This understanding changes ordinary moments more than extraordinary ones. You begin noticing it while standing in line, sitting in traffic, reading an unexpected message, or listening to someone who completely misunderstands your intentions. Situations that once seemed capable of deciding the emotional direction of your entire day gradually lose that authority. Not because they become pleasant, and certainly not because they stop happening, but because your mind no longer treats every inconvenience as a personal crisis that demands immediate emotional involvement. You begin seeing how many moments in life simply ask for patience rather than resistance. You recognize that countless frustrations survive only because your attention continues feeding them long after they have served any useful purpose. When that habit slowly fades, life feels lighter, without anything outside actually becoming easier. The weight you carried was often created less by reality itself and more by the endless struggle against realities that had already unfolded. There is also a quiet humility that begins growing alongside this kind of inner stability. You stop believing you have to possess all the answers before moving forward. You become more comfortable admitting uncertainty, changing your perspective when new understanding appears, and allowing other people to hold opinions different from your own without immediately experiencing them as threats. That humility is not weakness. It is confidence freed from the need to constantly defend itself. You realize that much of your previous exhaustion came from trying to maintain an image that was never sustainable. You wanted to appear capable all the time, respected all the time, understood all the time, appreciated all the time. Those expectations quietly became another source of suffering because they depended entirely on how other people chose to respond. Once that dependence begins fading, something remarkable replaces it. Your peace becomes less about receiving constant confirmation from the world and more about remaining honest with yourself, regardless of what the world happens to say. Perhaps the greatest surprise is discovering that this way of living never distances you from other people. It actually allows you to meet them more genuinely. You listen without immediately preparing your defense. You forgive more easily because you recognize your own imperfections reflected in theirs. You establish healthier boundaries because your decisions are no longer driven by fear of rejection or desperate attempts to gain approval. Compassion becomes stronger because it is no longer confused with emotional dependence. Strength becomes quieter because it no longer needs recognition to prove it exists. Even kindness changes. It stops becoming something offered in exchange for appreciation and becomes an expression of the person you have chosen to become. That kind of kindness cannot be manipulated as easily because it comes from conviction rather than expectation. Over time, you also begin noticing that the people who seem the strongest are rarely the ones who control every room they enter. More often, they are the ones who remain themselves regardless of the room they enter. They do not become louder around loud people or colder around cold people. They do not abandon their values because someone else abandoned theirs first. Their character remains remarkably consistent because it is guided by principles rather than emotional weather. This consistency creates a quiet sense of trust that no performance can imitate. People may not always agree with them, but they instinctively recognize that they are standing in the presence of someone whose peace is not constantly being negotiated with the outside world. That kind of stability cannot be purchased, borrowed, or achieved overnight. It is built through thousands of ordinary moments when no one else is watching, each one requiring the simple decision to return once again to clarity instead of impulse. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of all. Your life will never be remembered because you avoided every disappointment or escaped every hardship. No one is granted that privilege. What ultimately shapes your experience is the person those hardships quietly invite you to become. Each setback asks whether your values disappear the moment life becomes inconvenient. Each criticism asks whether your identity truly belongs to you or to the opinions of strangers. Each unexpected change asks whether your peace was ever rooted in certainty or whether it has learned to exist, even while the future remains unknown. Those questions are never answered once. They are answered repeatedly, often in moments so ordinary that they seem insignificant at the time. Yet those ordinary moments quietly become your character. They become your habits. They become the invisible foundation beneath every decision you make. Long after specific disappointments have been forgotten, the way you learn to respond to them remains. That is the lasting gift of this practice. It teaches you that the strongest protection you will ever possess is not the ability to control the world around you, but the quiet discipline to remain grounded within yourself while the world continues changing exactly as it always has. Peace has never been something you discover once and keep forever. It is something you choose again and again, each time life invites you to react instead of reflect. Every moment of patience, every pause before speaking, and every decision to protect your inner world strengthens a part of you that no circumstance can easily shake. That quiet strength is built one choice at a time. If this reflection gave you a new perspective, don't stop here. One of the videos on your screen continues this journey and explores another timeless lesson that can help you build an even calmer, wiser, and more resilient mind. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal. Your time, your presence, and your willingness to grow mean more than you know. Until next time, stay grounded, stay thoughtful, and always return to the peace that begins within.